Okay, so here I have a legendary MMT-8, but this one does something funky when you turn it on. You get all the lights, the screen is pretty blank, and, generally it's unresponsive. You can't do anything. And I have seen people have this problem on the internet before, and I've never found anybody that fixed it, but I think I can. Okay, so I'm going to start by testing really basic things. You can't see underneath that plate, but there's a voltage regulator over there, and on the left here we've got the CPU connected to ground and the output leg of the voltage regulator, and I just want to make sure that I have a good 5-volt signal. Looks like we do. So we know that the chip is getting power. I've already swapped all of these chips into a known good unit and not had any luck. This is the CPU, this is the EEPROM with the operating system, and these are the RAM chips. At first I thought that the RAM chips might be a problem, but having swapped them all into a known good unit, I'm pretty sure all the chips are good. In fact, the CPU is actually for my good one, but since they're both working, I don't see any point in swapping it. Okay, so I verified that the CPU has a proper 5-volt supply, and I checked the ground too. I didn't record that. So next, just thinking, okay, how does the CPU turn on? We got voltage, we got ground, and then we need a clock. So I've looked up this processor, and I was able to find the service manual for the MMT-8 as well, and it shows you how the Zener diode off to the left-hand side between my probes here connect to pins 2 and 3, or I might have the numbering off, but connects to the pin where my red probe is and the one beside it. And it's a 12 megahertz clock, and sure enough, if we look at my multimeter, we've got 12 megahertz. So we have a good clock. Okay, next, service manual talks about what's called the reset circuit, and this is used when you power it on and also when you turn it off to give the CPU time to save the contents that were memory and just avoid corruption essentially. And it talks about how at the end of the boot stage it drops the reset line of the CPU down to 0. And that does happen on my good unit, but what's happening here is that pin 9, where my red probe is, on this bad unit isn't dropping back down. So this made me think, is the CPU, is it just not starting, or is it starting and then just being put in a loop by constantly resetting, since this voltage is still telling it to reset? Okay, so I'm going to test my theory that it's just that the reset line is not going to ground and staying high at 5 volts. It's just not letting the CPU continue to boot and probably just looping and looping. We can see our panel's completely unresponsive. The LCD isn't displaying anything. And so over at our chip here, I've got a wire connected to the ground. And I think if I touch this, I may actually get something. See if I can get that in there at the same time. That's going to be tricky. Boom. There we go. The MMT-8 has booted, and that's because I'm forcing this pin to go to ground. And this does actually respond. All the functions are available. I just can't do this with my hands tied up like this, but now I know how to fix it, and it's just going to be a matter of figuring out why this circuit up top here, I believe, is the reset circuit. I have to go back to the schematic and figure it out, but chances are one or more of these components is not doing what it's supposed to. Maybe a capacitor, maybe a transistor. But once I can get that to start delivering a proper reset signal, this will be fixed. Okay, so I've just waited more than a month to get a replacement IC I suspected that this voltage comparator was bad after kind of diagnosing the circuit as much as I could. And so that's been replaced, and let's see what happens when we power it up. Bam! And everything is working. I can turn parts on and off. It's still a little sticky because these things are old and that happens, but I have successfully fixed it.